This is a November update on my 112 gallon Average Reef. Somehow this is the last day of November. The month just flew by despite not really doing much. Overall, there have been some changes to the tank, which mostly include cutting back corals. It's not quite as drastic as I planned, but I actually have removed a fair bit of stuff and haven't added anything yet. The biggest thing is that giant green leather. I cut quite a few branches off of it. These guys are a real pain to attach, but they're floating around in my frag tank instead of stinging all my other corals. You can see the white parts. It's a little bit hard to see, but that's where the cuts were made and new polyps are already growing. The base of this coral is super thick. I love that it's a giant colony, but it was just stinging way too many corals. Fortunately, the sting is pretty weak, but when the corals rest on them, it's nowhere near ideal. On the bottom, I have rearranged things, and this Porites was a little bit stung up. It wasn't really doing too well anyways. Fortunately, that chalice is out of reach of the rhizo though. Over here, I cut some of that toadstool off. It's still propagating more, but it's shading all these corals less. Over here, it's still a little bit of a mess, arranging the far corner where my overflow is. I've kind of just randomly arranged things, giving this Pectinia as much space as possible since it does have pretty big sweepers. I am thinking of fragging it just because the far right is an easy spot to get a few frags from. My elegance is looking real deflated here, only because I pushed it back moments before filming. It actually gets so big that it rests against the front glass, so I had to move it so that I could clean it. I also took out a bunch of that hammer. That wasn't deliberate, it actually fell, it's glued to the overflow, so when it broke off I put half of it in the frag tank. I tried moving my nicer clove polyps up here after removing a couple handfuls of the brown ones, but they're already covered up. This acro surrounded by softies is still doing okay. It is stung out on the bottom, but it's growing upward with that 1 inch of water above it. Things are still real close, but they're not touching as much, so that buys a little bit of time. I probably could have cut back more extreme, but I still want the tank to look good. I am starting to scrape off some of these green mushrooms. They're just growing too fast, and while I do like these simple soft corals, it's not ideal when they end up growing over my expensive LPS frags. Now that the big leather has been cut back, you can see all of these corals a lot better. They're definitely getting more light. And I did cut back the Gorgonian as well. It's not looking too good in this video as it was just shedding, so there's a bit of algae on it. Some people may see that as a concern, but you can see it's pounded with flow, so this is just something that happens once in a while. Usually I do wipe it off a bit though, to give it a helping hand. The side view is still my favorite. I do need to get in the far corner and cut back a bit. There's also a couple of Aiptasia, nothing major, but there's always 1 or 2 in this tank. Here you can really see the corals touching the front of the glass, and then obviously they're touching the back of the glass too. I will probably break the acro off just so I can cut off the back end. It's growing right on the glass and it's preventing me from scraping that corner there. A clean back just makes the tank look so much better, so it's worth doing even if you damage some corals cleaning the tank. Other than that, I'm sad to say I lost my flame hawkfish. This was his favorite spot to perch. He actually had dropsy, which is more common in goldfish, but what happened is he just kept swelling up until he finally passed away. With so few fish in the tank, I have decided to order a few more, but they have to go through quarantine first, so it'll be a while before I add them to the tank. Since there's not a lot of room for corals, but there is a lot of room for fish, it should make an improvement to the reef. Thanks for watching, and happy reefing.